Deep within the dense forest, a mysterious voice echoed from the shadows, lamenting those who squandered their brief time on insatiable greed. Meanwhile, the girl sat in the carriage, her gaze thoughtful as she looked ahead, musing that their lives were truly too fragile and fleeting. The girl clutched the ancient book in her hand, a surge of indignation rising within her against the arrogant ones who only spoke falsehoods. She silently condemned them as ungrateful beings, devoid of respect or gratitude for Mother Earth who nurtured them. With a stern expression and contemptuous eyes, the elf coldly uttered disparaging words, calling them unclean and untamed creatures. She asserted firmly that, to her, they were nothing more than lesser life forms. A hand gently reached up amidst the green foliage, carefully plucking a ripe orange. The crisp sound of the fruit being picked rang out, marking the bounty of the harvest amidst beautiful nature. The elf girl cradled the fruit in her hands with overflowing happiness, her eyes sparkling as if holding 1,000 stars. A radiant smile bloomed on her lips, showing the pure delight of being one with abundant nature. The girl smiled mischievously, teasing Rhea that she must be picking so much fruit for her boyfriend. Rhea immediately flushed crimson, flustered and denying it repeatedly at her friend's jest. The girl didn't let up, continuing to tease that he loved oranges and reminiscing about her own golden age 1,000 years ago. Unable to endure the teasing any longer, Rhea cried out in embarrassment, pleading with her friend to stop at once. While the light-haired one wasn't paying attention, the mischievous elf girl poked her friend's back with her finger. The sudden poke made Rhea startle and lean back, causing a few fruits to tumble out of the basket amidst giggles. Suddenly, Rhea collapsed, her hand weakly touching the fruit basket as her body slid to the ground. A voice cried out her name in alarm, shocked by the sudden collapse of her companion. The girl was utterly horrified, sweat pouring down her as she realized the presence of humans, dreaded foes. Meanwhile, the bearded commander angrily berated the young soldier for foolishly targeting the head, violating the order to capture. The girl desperately pleaded for aid from the sacred forest spirits, her trembling hands clutching the glowing object. In response to her plea, the forest spirit roared mightily, summoning the immense power of the earth, transforming his arm into a colossal stone mass that shook the very ground. A colossal mass, dark and twisted like ancient tree roots, suddenly surged forth, emitting a roar that vibrated through the entire space. Its tremendous power swept up dust and leaves, signaling a natural fury descending. The old man with the flamethrower coldly aimed his weapon at the mysterious figure, unleashing a stream of destructive energy. Witnessing this, the elves were utterly stunned, unable to believe that a human could wield such magic-like power. With a triumphant smile and a self-satisfied expression, the old scientist raised a strange device in his hand, declaring proudly. He asserted that what they called magic was, in reality, merely a small thing called science. The man with the gun stood tall, his cold gaze fixed on the elf girl fallen on the ground beside the ruined fruit basket. In that silent moment, the difference in how humans and elves valued time became clearer than ever. While the elves were immersed in their peaceful lives within the green forest, the sudden, thunderous sound of gunfire tore through the quiet space. Panic enveloped them, their faces bewildered and terrified by the brutal, unannounced assault. Human progress advanced at an alarming rate, bringing destruction to every corner of the forest. The masked soldier coldly fired his weapon, bringing down an innocent creature, a testament to the ruthlessness their civilization brought. The days of peace ended swiftly and brutally under the heels of the invaders. The group of elf captives, chained, trudged in despair under the sinister gaze of the dark-haired guard, who wore a triumphant smile. Amidst the loud rumbling that shook the entire forest, a carriage hastily rolled away, carrying the sound of muffled sobs from within. The young girl clutched her face in anguish, tears streaming down as she desperately called out Master Rodri's name in extreme fear. The girl's sandaled feet restlessly rubbed against each other, reflecting the torment gnawing at her heart. She felt she could not bear the terrible burden of guilt weighing on her shoulders for another moment. The girl's face flushed, sweat beaded as she awkwardly tried to explain their relationship. She stammered that they were supposed to be friends, but her words faltered, revealing her inner confusion. The knightess indignantly spoke up to defend the horses, considering them friends, not tools to be treated cruelly. Just then, the attendant girl returned with a surprised and angry expression, loudly calling Master Rodri's name to alert him to the unfolding emergency. In the luxurious space, the long-haired elf sat relaxed on a soft sofa, holding a small book with an elegant air. He rested his chin thoughtfully, his gaze contemplative as if immersed in the words or some distant thought. The blonde elf couldn't hide her indignation, believing that treating horses like slaves pained her heart. In anger and frustration, she threw the carrot away, even as the dark-haired male elf sitting beside her maintained a cold indifference. A moment later, the horse happily munched on the carrot, its face radiating an unusual contentment. The elf girl beside him angrily scolded, unable to comprehend why he would lose an elf's self-respect for such a trivial pleasure of a horse. The long-haired elf narrowed his eyes sharply, looking at the person opposite him with disdain and annoyance. He questioned in a harsh tone, unable to believe that the other party was so blind as to disregard the value of what they called just a carrot. With a proud expression, the long-haired elf carefully held up a giant, sparkling carrot, introducing it as a priceless treasure. He excitedly declared it pure 10,000-mile carat gold, a masterpiece containing boundless power sufficient for a 10,000-step march. He enthusiastically described the exquisite silk attire, designed to protect delicate skin from harsh sunlight. The softest and most breathable silk material was praised as a masterpiece, making anyone who saw it marvel in admiration. Next, a dazzling solid gold horseshoe was displayed, sparkling enchantingly. It was lauded as a symbol of her dominance, the ultimate tool to capture the attention of all Mares. Master Rodri smugly ran his hand through his hair, reveling in the joy of working with his own hands and sweating, proclaiming himself the greatest and most handsome merchant in the world. The horse neighed in response, while the blonde elf stood beside him, mouth agape in astonishment, never expecting her master to be so invested in work. The guide elf clasped her hands emotionally, expressing immense honor at serving Master Rodri. In response, Rodri smiled approvingly, praising her as the perfect elf archetype with her love for nature and absolute harmony with all creatures. The elf girl clenched her fists, her eyes shining with enthusiasm as she promised a safe and enjoyable journey. However, Master Rodri merely gazed indifferently out the window, sighing that he was utterly fed up with this endless expanse of green forest. The blonde elf excitedly introduced the hidden wonders of the forest, realizing this was her guest's first time here after a long period of working outside. Master Rodri, with his metallic arm peeking out, had his curiosity piqued by the eloquent words, but then he innocently asked a question that surprised his listener. "What is commerce?" Master Rodri offered a light flirtation, suggesting the girl become his assistant simply because she was pleasant to look at. However, the elf girl cheerfully declined, smiling brightly and asserting that she was very content with her current job. With a radiant smile and sparkling eyes, the elf girl enthusiastically described a super cute little village and the fragrant orange grove nearby. She turned to suggest to everyone that they should stop for a short rest to enjoy this wonderful scenery. The elf girl was so excited she shouted, "Hooray!" Her face glowing with extreme joy. She assured Master Rodri that he would love this place so much he would never want to return. Before them, a colossal wall of fire erupted fiercely, emitting a terrifying roar as if to engulf everything. The elf girl and Master Rodri stood frozen, facing the surging destructive power that blocked their path. Master Rodri coldly announced it was time to leave, without hesitation. The sudden declaration made the elf girl frantically shout to stop him, while the blonde elf girl turned around, her eyes wide with astonishment at this unexpected decision. Amidst the desolate scene of the blazing building, a young man lay barely breathing, struggling to swallow sips of water to sustain himself. In agony, he weakly uttered a plea for help, while the elf girl stood silently looking down, witnessing the unfolding tragedy. The elf girl was stunned to find Kaye lying unconscious, a victim of the brutal elf hunters. Master Rodri stood beside her, unable to hide his concern, surprised that those humans had ventured so deep into the forest to carry out the attack. Master Rodri kindly advised his exhausted friend to rest and recover. The elf boy, despite being drenched in sweat and his body aching, still clenched his fists with determination, asserting that he could not sit still and relax in this dire situation. The elf boy leaned forward, his face contorted with anger and tension, sweat pouring down his forehead. He roared in fury, convinced that the enemy was making all innocent people tremble in fear at that very moment. The elf girl trembled, clinging to the fragile hope that the Council of Elders would resolve everything. However, the elf boy angrily swung his scythe to the ground, shouting loudly at her, unable to believe she still naively placed her trust in those useless individuals. The elf boy gritted his teeth, determined to stop those people before they enslaved all the villagers. But just then, a loud noise rang out. Kaye collapsed to the ground unconscious, making him frantically shout his friend's name in despair. The small monster, though injured, still growled aggressively, warning the outsider to stay away from this matter. In response, Master Rodri merely stood calmly, coldly declaring that such stubborn actions were akin to seeking one's own demise. The elf boy knelt in pain, but his will still urged him to quickly go and save Rhea. Faced with such recklessness, Master Rodri coldly questioned why he was willing to risk his life for just one woman. The cloaked figure's desperate cry rang out upon seeing Kaye stumble and nearly fall. The elf girl rushed to support her exhausted comrade, her face showing clear horror as he collapsed in her arms. The elf boy, flustered, suggested praying to the gods for a way out, but Master Rodri immediately dismissed it with a sharp gaze. He sighed in disappointment, reminding the guide that for a merchant, time was money and could not be wasted on useless things. A large bird soared through the forest sky, attracting the attention of the group below. The blonde elf girl pointed to the sky in surprise, urging the boy beside her to try asking the bird, while Master Rodri quietly observed from a distance. Amidst the magnificent city scene with its majestic arches, a commanding voice rang out, ordering the search for the elf hunters. A feather gently fell from the sky, drifting leisurely like a mysterious omen of impending changes. Long lines of shackled elves stood with bowed heads in humiliation, awaiting their harsh fate. The female elf suppressed her sorrow, gently reassuring her trembling young daughter Rhea, promising she would do everything to protect her, all under the cold gaze of the slave traders. The corpulent lord sat grandly in his luxurious carriage, raising a glass of wine to enjoy his lavish life. Below, naked elf captives were chained to the vehicle, forced to crawl on their knees across the ground to pull him, creating a cruel contrast between opulence and extreme suffering. The mysterious man's shouts rang out, calling the crowd to gather and witness an important event. Beside him, the elf girl stood frozen, drenched in sweat, her eyes wide with panic at what was about to unfold. The merchant with a cunning smile pointed towards the blindfolded elves behind him, loudly hawking them as if they were rare commodities. He enthusiastically advertised them as the freshest, never-before-seen products, aiming to incite the greed of the buying crowd. The elf girl bowed her head, her entire body trembling with shame and humiliation as she heard the perverse advertisements about herself. The seller unhesitatingly touted their ability to work tirelessly, bear offspring, and even satisfy the buyer's darkest desires. The blonde boy's face was contorted in agony, tears streaming down as he wailed in despair. His declaration of needing an elf maiden of his own rang out like a heart-wrenching cry, full of sorrow and haunting. In extreme panic, Rhea cast aside all fears for her own fate, bravely confronting her captor. She screamed through her tears, asserting that she didn't care what happened to her, only begging him to release her mother. The merchant coldly offered a cruel solution to the bound elf girl. If she wanted to save her mother, she should pay to acquire her. Old Man Goggles, standing nearby, chimed in, angrily shouting and urging her to quickly complete this harsh transaction. The mocking laughter of the crowd rang out piercingly, directed at the bewildered long-eared girl. A man pointed at her, uttering contemptuous words, doubting that she even understood the meaning of the shameful numbers attached to her. The elf girl timidly held out the large fruit she had personally nurtured, her eyes filled with both anxiety and pride. She stammered as she described its beautiful color and wonderful flavor, hoping to receive recognition for the fruits of her labor. The merchant stared hungrily at his bound prey, as if looking at a delicious meal. At the same time, a giant boot crushed something on the ground, leaving the elf girl standing nearby frozen in horror. The elf girl collapsed in pain after the brutal kick, her whole body trembling with fear. Old Man Goggle stood above, scolding wildly, claiming that an easy life had made the elves' brains dull and rotten. Old Man Goggle calmly proposed a transaction, his eyes scrutinizing the other party. The elf girl, though anxious, responded decisively, demanding he bring the money immediately if he wanted to proceed with the agreement. A chaotic auction erupted, the crowd frantically vying, shouting bids to acquire the little girl and the mother. Greedy shouts rang out incessantly, everyone wanting to claim the two unfortunate mother and daughter for themselves. The horse suddenly let out a long, piercing whinny, its eyes wide and mouth agape in extreme astonishment. It seemed to have just witnessed or sensed something incredibly shocking unfolding right before its eyes. Amidst the noisy and bustling slave market, the cloaked figure stood silently observing the long line of elf slaves being sold. In front of them was a bloodthirsty crowd of buyers, creating a tragic and cruel scene of flesh trade. Master Rodri stopped, bending down to pick up a small object on the ground with a look of surprise. He wondered if this was another sprite, his eyes thoughtfully considering the mysterious origin of what he had just found. Master Rodri took a delicious bite of orange, savoring its wonderful flavor. He praised it endlessly, enthusiastically describing the orange's superior quality and envisioning turning it into a luxurious, expensive gift. Master Rodri smirked calculatingly, a dazzling, enchanting apple in his hand. He whispered triumphantly, certain that this small treasure would bring him a huge fortune. Master Rodri stepped forward, declaring he would take the bound elf girl, whom he called the Wonderful Orange. Meanwhile, a spectator in the crowd pointed curiously at the mysterious cloaked man, surprised that he moved freely without slave shackles. Master Rodri sternly offered a deal, stating he had money and asking the elf girl to name her price. Faced with the unexpected offer, the elf girl looked visibly flustered and scared, beads of sweat forming as she didn't know how to react. In extreme despair, the elf girl knelt, earnestly pleading with the elf boy to save her mother, tears streaming down her face. Faced with her plea, the elf boy remained calmly composed, while the merchant secretly observed everything from the shadows. The irritable vendor aggressively shooed him away, shouting loudly for Master Rodri to stay away from his goods. Startled by the sudden scolding, Master Rodri fell silent, seemingly trying to avoid this unreasonable outburst. The atmosphere became extremely tense as the merchant tried to approach but was stopped by the soldiers. The merchant begged the guards to apprehend someone else instead of him, but Master Rodri coldly remarked that the soldiers were merely performing their duty. Immediately after, harsh impacts sounded, criticizing the merchant. The elf boy spurred his horse to terrifying speeds, creating loud noises that shook the entire racetrack. Witnessing the crazy scene, the elf girl screamed in terror while everyone else was left speechless with wide-eyed astonishment. The smug elf woman held up documents, declaring ownership of the entire market, leaving the merchant and the surrounding crowd stunned and disbelieving. Just as they suspected it was fake, a man appeared, confirming that this shocking news, just delivered by a messenger, was true. The elf girl proudly announced that Master Rodri beside her was the new landowner, who had paid double the asking price in cash immediately. Faced with the merchant's extreme horror, the girl couldn't hide her contempt, angrily scolding him for his previous disrespectful attitude. Standing before the attentive crowd, the announcer loudly declared that on his own land, all elves would enjoy basic human rights and freedom of movement. This firm declaration seemed to open a new chapter full of hope for those lining up behind him. The merchant roared furiously upon seeing slaves treated as equals to humans, pointing a weapon and threatening to enslave everyone and seize all their possessions. While the elf girl screamed in terror, she tried to shield herself from the cruel man's aggressive frenzy. The elf girl bent over, covering her mouth, her face flushed with extreme embarrassment and confusion at the awkward situation. Standing nearby, Master Rodri turned his head to look at her over his shoulder, seemingly contemplating this endearing yet awkward reaction. Master Rodri spoke with disdain, deeming his words too profound for his opponent's limited intellect. Meanwhile, the old merchant was utterly stunned to see his potent tranquilizer dart completely ineffective against his adversary, unable to believe his eyes. Master Rodri arrogantly swept aside his cloak, revealing a protective undergarment crafted from the finest mithril. He confidently asserted that his opponent's trivial playthings wouldn't even scratch him in the slightest. The crowd gasped in astonishment, realizing the immense value of the mithril armor, unable to believe their eyes. The old merchant gritted his teeth in anger, unable to accept that an elf, considered backward, possessed such advanced technology. The elf girl clung tightly in fear to Master Rodri as the military commander ordered their immediate apprehension. Facing danger, Rodri calmly extended his hand, seemingly ready to unleash a sudden counterattack. Master Rodri unleashed a terrifying surge of power, sending all those charging at him flying away. Amidst the rubble and dust, even he exclaimed in astonishment at this sudden burst of might. Master Rodri gripped the sword emitting dazzling lightning bolts, feeling the surging power of the thunder spirit within. This weapon was described as capable of cleaving through anything at the speed of light, making it a true terror. Old Man Goggle broke out in a cold sweat, unable to believe his opponent possessed such a precious spirit sword. But he shook off his fear, fiercely urging his group to charge, to eliminate and plunder, disregarding the lives of the elf tribe. Despite all dangers, the soldiers charged forward with ferocious momentum. The leading soldier shouted orders to eliminate the target, his face revealing a cruel determination to finish off the opponent at all costs. Master Rodri coldly asserted his master status, mocking humanity's brazen treachery in violating the contract. With a sharp, authoritative gaze, he ordered them all to vanish from his sight immediately. Master Rodri moved like a gust of wind, unleashing a slash so swift it was invisible to the naked eye. In an instant, the surrounding enemies were torn apart in a bloody explosion, without realizing their end had arrived. Old Man Goggle was stunned. His prejudice about elves being dull and weak due to their love for peace completely crumbled. He couldn't comprehend how they could possess such terrifying power and resistance. The old merchant grimaced with tension, the energy around him fluctuating wildly as he wondered about the true identity of his opponent. He couldn't have imagined facing such a mysterious and formidable figure. The elf woman looked at Rodri with eyes filled with admiration, her cheeks flushed like a blossoming maiden. In her eyes, Master Rodri was now radiating such a brilliant and captivating aura that she couldn't look away. Master Rodri stood coldly looking down at his victim, still holding his sharp weapon. The old merchant was in extreme agony as one of his arms had been severed, blood gushing forth, marking the brutality of the engagement. A horrifying sight unfolded as a gouged-out eye, still with its optic nerve, dangled in midair. A piercing scream echoed, expressing extreme terror at this gory and gruesome image. The slave hunter now piteously begged, promising to return everything and never reoffend in exchange for his life. He tried to manipulate Master Rodri by reminding him of the elf's peace-loving nature, desperately seeking forgiveness. Old Man Goggle, his cracked spectacles askew, screamed in panic, sweat pouring like rain down his distorted face. He muttered about love, peace, and harmony, but his tense demeanor completely contradicted those pleasant words. Master Rodri casually walked away, leaving behind the defeated colossal monster's body, slumped in a pool of blood. The rescued villagers and hostages stood motionless, their eyes a mix of terror and awe, watching the mysterious hero's retreating figure. Amidst the battlefield strewn with fallen bodies, The cloaked elf warrior coldly swept a menacing gaze towards the survivors. He arrogantly challenged if anyone else dared to disturb his work, while the young girl behind him quietly observed. A click echoed as the key entered the lock, freeing the metal handcuffs that had restrained liberty. This act of liberation marked the end of the prisoner's confinement. 3 elf girls gathered together in a warm and cheerful atmosphere. While the Odango-haired fairy smiled brightly, the other 2 girls exchanged shy glances, their cheeks flushed, seemingly sharing a secret happiness. The tree settlement was bustling with enthusiastic labor. From the ground supervisors to the climbers high above and those carrying wood, everyone was diligently contributing to building a vibrant new life here. The elves emotionally expressed their deep gratitude to their benefactor who had saved them from their plight. Meanwhile, Rodri, who had just turned to leave, suddenly paused when he heard his name called from behind. Rodri blushed shyly, mumbling that he had only acquired a small amount of storage. Seeing this, the blonde girl seemed amused, while Master Rodri became annoyed, chiding him that there was no need to be overly modest about his accomplishments. Master Rodri declared with a raised chin that he was not the type of foolish hero who saved people without expecting anything in return, finding such an idea repulsive. This pragmatic and arrogant assertion left the small elf girl bewildered and uncomprehending. Master Rodri calmly explained a core business principle to the 2 young girls. Making others indebted to you is the foundation of trade. The braided-haired elf was stunned to hear this, while her companion beside her seemed to be starting to grasp the concept. With the demeanor of a shrewd merchant, Master Rodri made a decisive demand. He wanted to sign an exclusive contract, acquiring all rights to trade the oranges his partners would harvest from then on. A mysterious hand reached out as if to grasp everything in its palm. A voice echoed, full of ambition and possessiveness, firmly asserting that the goal would definitely belong to him. Master Rodri lifted the girl's chin, smiled slyly, and declared he wanted her to belong only to him. This possessive declaration made the blonde girl blush deeply with embarrassment, while her chibi self was so shocked her mouth hung open. The elf girl's eyes widened in surprise, her hands covering her mouth as she grasped the concept of commerce for the first time. This novel truth was so shocking that it made her stammer, unable to believe that things operated in such a way. The sudden appearance of the elf village chief greatly astonished the elf girl and the young man accompanying her. Contrary to their apprehension, the chief laughed heartily, showing great amusement and praising the newcomer as an interesting individual. The elf elder thoughtfully recalled how their tribe had been isolated from the outside world for so many years. The elf girl standing beside him agreed, admitting that they seemed to have forgotten the concept of time's passage in their isolation. Looking directly at the person opposite him, Master Rodri seriously stated that to face the coming new era, they needed innovative thinking. And he firmly asserted that spirits like him were the crucial element they were looking for. Master Rodri smugly ran a hand through his hair, arrogantly declaring that there was no one else in this world quite like him. He considered himself unique and showed pity for anyone who dared to compare themselves to him. The elf elder agreed with a cheerful laugh. The elf elder stood amidst the peaceful scenery, expressing deep belief that the protagonist was fully capable of helping others change for the better. Master Rodri coldly waved his hand in refusal, asserting that he had no interest whatsoever in the matter being discussed. This decisive reaction was met only with a knowing ho-ho laugh from the elf elder, as if he had anticipated it. Beneath the village archway the 2 met. The taller person expressed admiration that the other had traveled so far to the elder's village for trade, and revealed that he had heard of him through me. Master Rodri raised his hands high and exclaimed, "Tada!" proudly presenting the magnificent architectural marvel before them. The entire group looked up at the massive and intricate treehouse with awe, impressed by its grand scale. The elf village chief kindly offered the young elf girl the largest house in the village as a place to stay, as a token of gratitude. This overly generous offer left the girl gaping in astonishment, unable to believe her ears. Master Rodri nodded in satisfaction, assessing the item before him as compact and highly practical. The elf girl beside him was so shocked her eyes widened. Meanwhile, another person, about to leave, was called back, creating an unexpected situation. Master Rodri sternly prevented the other person from leaving, asserting that he could not let them go while the debt of gratitude remained unpaid. Immediately after, he ordered his subordinate to retrieve an important item from the carriage to resolve the issue. The observers' gazes fell upon the wooden barrels scattered on the ground. A question arose, full of curiosity, as they noticed the unusual presence of these wine barrels here. The smooth, dark wine was poured into a glass, emitting an alluring aroma. The narrator enthusiastically introduced it as a masterpiece made from the finest grapes of the South, a supremely luxurious, premium wine. In the festive atmosphere of the party, the elf boy raised his glass, cheering everyone to celebrate the brilliantly successful transaction. The elf girl beside him was equally radiant, inviting everyone to experience this wonderful flavor with all their heart and soul. The elf girl hugged the glass of wine to her chest, her face filled with blissful happiness as she enjoyed the delicious drink. In another corner, short-haired elf kindly handed a glass of wine to her cloaked friend amidst the intimate and joyful atmosphere of the gathering. Crisp laughter rang out as the young elf woman and the short-haired young man playfully teased each other, full of affection. From a distance, Master Rodri quietly stood drinking wine, his calm gaze observing the happy moment of the couple. The frame zoomed in on the face of a mysterious character, long hair obscuring part of their features. Their eyes revealed a melancholic and pensive look, and their pointed ears twitched slightly as if listening or contemplating something distant. The spiky-haired young man trembled with fury, shouting at those present that they would not forgive the mistreatment of their kin. This righteous indignation received absolute agreement from the girl beside him, who was also suppressing intense emotions. While enthusiastically expounding on the New Age elf lifestyle taught by Master Rodri, the blonde girl was suddenly struck by a painful head knock from above. The cup in her hand fell to the ground, shattering, interrupting her passionate lecture. The elf girl raised her fist with spirit, calling on everyone to join her in delivering sweet justice upon those despicable scoundrels. The crowd below immediately responded with fervor, shouting to follow the lead of this passionate master. With fiery, resolute eyes, the elf boldly declared their sacred mission. Master Rodri affirmed that they would protect the peace of this forest with their own hands and strength, independent of anyone else. Under the bright moonlight illuminating the snowy peaks and vast pine forests, a shout echoed through the space. The voice, full of excitement, agreed with calling those individuals scoundrels, creating a heroic resonance in the night. Master Rodri nodded in agreement with the statement he had just heard, his face full of contemplation. Afterward, he quietly left the warm fireplace area, walked over, and sat down at the intricately carved stone table, seemingly preparing for an important discussion. The magnificent and splendid castle stood majestically in the night, its sharp spires reaching up to pierce the starry sky. A crescent moon hung suspended, casting a mysterious silvery light over the ancient architectural marvel. At the foot of the stone staircase leading up to the dark archway, two mysterious voices conversed. They reassured someone to view the upcoming event as merely another business transaction, appealing directly to the other party's commercial interests. From the shadows, the cloaked woman emerged with a mysterious smile on her lips, holding a lantern that illuminated her features. She introduced herself, or rather, revealed the true identity of the other party as Rodri, the renowned head of the Red Bird Merchant Guild. The portrait of Prince Kyle, the sixth prince of the Eastern Kingdom, appeared with great majesty. With his long, lustrous hair and pointed ears, he exuded a cold, regal aura, his sharp eyes seemingly piercing the very soul of those he faced. The girl outlined a bold plan, to infiltrate the elf community and steal the treasure, Heart of the Soul. Hearing this, Prince Kyle looked pensive and hesitant, wondering about the price to pay or the consequences if he were to truly embark on this perilous undertaking. The girl formally announced the important news that the other party's royal status would be restored. Prince Kyle smiled gently, bowing his head to accept the arrangement as per his wishes. The elf group focused their energy into the fiery orb, eager to claim ultimate power from the soul of the heart to master magic. The woman smirked maliciously, declaring their land would once again dominate the world. She then taunted Prince Kyle about the irony of him having to risk his life just to return to the royalty he despised. With a stern expression, Prince Kyle asserted that the right to decide the value of this transaction belonged to him, but he was immediately interrupted by a call to stop from someone who had just entered. The man handed the blonde woman a pair of specially crafted earrings, instructing her to wear them before entering the forest. Prince Kyle spurred his horse to gallop across the vast grassland, leaving a hasty good luck wish behind. A colossal foot descended powerfully onto the ground, while a mystical entity spoke, judging the transience of human life, criticizing humanity's greed, deceit, and ingratitude towards Mother Earth. With a look of utter contempt, Prince Kyle waved his hand dismissively, considering the creatures before him to be filthy, savage, and inferior beings. Master Rodri looked down with a sharp, cold gaze, uttering a brief but weighty remark about humankind. The atmosphere of the gathering became lively with boisterous laughter and chatter, where the striped shirt boy and the crowd, including the elves, were immersed in extreme excitement. The camera focused on the wide, strained eyes of the long-haired person, revealing deep thoughts tearing at their inner self. Night fell, enveloping the city scene, where rooftops and architectural structures lay silently beneath the starry sky. Rapid footsteps echoed along with hurried breaths as the character dashed away into the darkness. The traveler hastily called out, insisting on accompanying the man ahead, even though he continued to walk silently. The traveler anxiously questioned how the guild would manage without its leader, but Master Rodri merely dismissed it coldly, deeming it an unnecessary worry. The traveler gaped in shock and indignation when bluntly criticized that his freckled face could never pass for an elf. Master Rodri calmly reassured that it was just a small stroll through the forest, despite the traveler showing annoyance and warning not to cause trouble. Master Rodri sternly warned about those who had gone and never returned, making the traveler even more anxious about the chilling mysteries shrouding the forest. Master Rodri casually hypothesized that if anything were to happen to him, the other person would be the successor, causing him to break into a sweat from surprise. The traveler enthusiastically affirmed his absolute loyalty, seeing Rodri as the only leader, while he merely chuckled it off. With a resolute gaze, the traveler expressed unwavering belief that the other person would surely return safely no matter what happened. Master Rodri turned and walked away, sarcastically advising the traveler to go into the forest and find another gullible soul to exploit. The mysterious wolf with glowing eyes suggested that the best way to find the spirit's heart was to integrate into elf society and utilize them as guides. In a forest about 200 miles north of the village Rodri had saved, a group of elves were happily gathered, harvesting fruit in a peaceful atmosphere. From a distance, Master Rodri stood silently with his arms crossed, his stern gaze observing the bustling, chattering crowd. Rodri showed annoyance at having to wait so long, but as soon as the elf girl rushed over to apologize, he simply responded with a knowing smile. Cradling the strangely shaped berries in her hands, the elf girl murmured about her determination to acquire them at any cost. While the elf girl seriously introduced the local specialty, Master Rodri ate the berries, making the girl beside him giggle. Master Rodri's eyes widened in surprise at the terribly intense aftertaste. Then he cried out in distress as the spiciness shot straight to his brain. Master Rodri again wore a calculating smirk, his mind filled with avaricious thoughts of making a fortune. Master Rodri struggled miserably against the aggressive flock of birds, only to be infuriated when the elf girl casually revealed that the birds were attracted to the pungent, spicy scent he carried. Rodri angrily crackled with electrical energy, while the birds hiding behind him gleefully teased that the creatures seemed utterly captivated by his scent. Master Rodri broke out in a cold sweat as he and the braided-haired girl faced the wrath of the elf elder, who was leading a group surrounding them. The elf elder coldly demanded the uninvited guest leave the village immediately, a stark contrast to the delighted expression and giggles of the elf girl standing beside him. Rapid clattering sounds rang out, signaling a swift and powerful movement in progress. Sitting in the carriage as it traversed the forest, the girl mused about people who had lived in seclusion for too long, guessing they would surely maintain a high degree of vigilance towards strangers. While the elf girl sadly wished for harmony between the villages, Master Rodri coldly analyzed that their excessive caution was precisely what caused them to be eliminated from the competitive laws of civilization. Master Rodri toyed with the ornament in his hand, recalling how he had initially been flatly refused by the chili-growing village, despite their shortage of fruit. The elf girl couldn't hide her delight, joyfully recounting how the oranges she brought had created a huge sensation. The elf girl prattled on, full of pride about her new nickname, making Master Rodri beside her simply lower his head in embarrassment. The elf girl explained that she took on this job with the sincere hope of helping the elf community interact and understand each other better. The words echoed through the ancient forest, affirming a powerful belief that only by understanding each other, they would form a strong, united front to overcome all obstacles. With a pensive expression filled with regret, Master Rodri silently concluded that beautiful vision would never come to pass. Before the solemn ranks of tribal soldiers, a warning was issued about the brevity of time and the tragedy that would strike if the elf tribes continued to be wary of each other and ignored the true threat. The braided-haired girl smiled coldly, uttering a prophecy of unavoidable doom as time waited for no one, causing the mysterious man to cast a meaningful glance. Sitting in the luxurious train car, Master Rodri calmly listened to the accusation from a mysterious individual that he was personally inviting danger into his home, bringing a thief to his own treasure. Hearing a desperate cry for help, Master Rodri immediately rushed to investigate, leaving the exasperated elf girl in her wheelchair, who muttered about his foolish meddling while hastily wheeling after him. In a state of extreme panic, someone was in trouble, causing the elf girl to search and ask if everything was all right. The elf girl frantically turned to inquire about the cloaked figure, who was cowering, hidden in the tattered shadows of the forest. The girl approached and touched the mysterious person. The mysterious cloaked figure suddenly drew a blood-stained knife with a menacing look, causing the elf girl to let out only a single, utterly terrified scream. Amidst a hail of bullets from the ambushing black-cloaked soldiers, Master Rodri was surrounded by many soldiers, signaling that something dire was happening to him. Facing the barrel of a gun and a 3-second ultimatum from the hooded man, Master Rodri did not flinch, but calmly replied that such time was more than enough to turn the tables. A sharp sword stroke suddenly tore through the air right in front of the group of hooded warriors, leaving them stunned in the midst of the skirmish. While a victim was being dragged miserably across the suspension bridge and the elf girl was being threatened with a knife by the bald man, Master Rodri appeared coldly, uttering a praise filled with lethal intent about his opponent's strength. Standing at the bridgehead with a rifle on his shoulder, the man in black arrogantly asked his opponent if they knew his reputation before ordering them to stand still. Even as the elf girl threatened with a nerve-poisoned, lethal blade, Master Rodri maintained a terrifying composure, getting straight to the point and proposing a negotiation. With eyes as sharp as blades, Master Rodri made a ruthless demand, to surrender the opponent's head in exchange for the girl's life. With a smile full of resentment and satisfaction, the blond man declared he had finally found his sworn enemy, the goblin who had taken his brother's life. Master Rodri was stunned, his eyes wide with surprise, upon hearing his opponent mention the identity of his deceased brother. The silver-haired man emotionally recounted his brother's lifelong dream to become the greatest merchant on the continent, leaving those who listened in shock. The younger brother roared in fury, refusing to accept his elder brother being slain by a lowly elf, and frantically demanded immediate retribution from the opponent. Roughly seized by her hair by the kidnapper, the elf girl suppressed her pain and fear, screaming and begging the other to abandon her and flee. The mysterious man cruelly toyed with the hostage girl's extreme fear, while coldly questioning whether he intended to let this innocent girl perish for his own transgressions. In the intense pursuit on the ruined road, the man frantically ordered the girl to stop to seize the soul heart, but she risked her life to flee despite being cornered. Master Rodri let out a weary sigh, his face clearly showing fatigue and dejection. Standing alone on the bridge in the dead of night, Master Rodri coldly turned her back, bluntly declaring to the distant crowd that she had no intention of sacrificing her life for their benefit. Holding a knife to the trembling elf girl's throat, the round-eyed man mockingly chuckled, challenging his opponent that someone who once risked his life to save a loved one would never dare abandon a hostage. With an air of superiority, Master Rodri calmly laid out a condition. For the agreement to succeed, one must first identify what is most important. While the man philosophically smiled about desire and the fear of loss, Master Rodri admitted that for him, his own life was the ultimate priority. Master Rodri arrogantly demanded the whole world bow down at his feet, even as the panicked old man threatened to eliminate the hostage. He merely responded with an ambitious and ruthless grip. Master Rodri stood calmly amidst the encirclement, looking up at the night sky and stating that this was not the first time he had found himself in a predicament of being robbed. Seemingly too familiar with perilous situations, he warned them that a costly lesson was about to unfold as unfamiliar footsteps echoed nearby. With bloodshot eyes filled with murderous intent, Master Rodri growled, declaring that anyone who dared touch what belonged to him would not survive past tomorrow. He then warned his opponents that they were not facing a mere young man, but were signing their own demise. The middle-aged man trembled intensely as a cold blade pressed against his throat, sweat pouring down him in that life-or-death moment. The attacker coldly whispered into his ear, confirming that that very demise was intended for him. Master Rodri leisurely dripped the solution into the test tube, smiling as he offered a new, enticing deal to the bewildered old merchant. He proposed to honor his ambition of becoming a great merchant with a special business opportunity. An outstretched hand appeared amidst strange energy currents, tiny particles floating around as if the flesh was gradually dissolving into nothingness. The old merchant inhaled sharply, grimacing in surprise at the powerful scent that had just assailed his senses. In response to his query, the cloaked man with the gun raised his weapon and smugly confirmed the latent power of what they held. Master Rodri described a premium and extremely rare spice that only existed in a unique area deep within the forest. With a calm demeanor, Master Rodri held out the mysterious object, making a lucrative offer regarding its exclusive mining rights and location. In return, he demanded the opponent release the girl immediately. The elf girl turned in alarm, calling out Master Rodri's name, her face showing clear horror at the unexpected situation unfolding. Both she and the old man beside her were stunned, unable to believe what was happening before their eyes. Master Rodri stood with his back to the wind, musingly comparing the danger of frog venom to the historical value of black pepper, once likened to black gold. Master Rodri offered an enigmatic smile, raising high an artifact capable of revolutionizing the world and promising to turn the merchant into a legend. Faced with such a captivating offer, the merchant could only stare in astonishment, sweat pouring down as he was overwhelmed. The old merchant gave a sharp smile, pointing at the blonde-haired man and bringing up past pain about his deceased brother's dream of becoming the greatest merchant on the continent. The old merchant was utterly stunned, drenched in sweat as he heard the challenging question of why he didn't take over that dream instead of letting it fade into oblivion. Master Rodri pondered deeply about the meaningless passing, while Master Rodri coldly questioned what truly was the top priority: his brother's dream or himself. The thorny question made the elf girl beside him exclaim in confusion and distress. The old merchant buried his face in his hands, filled with shame and despair, while the elf girl stood nearby with a bewildered expression, not understanding what was happening amidst the tense atmosphere created by the strangers. The old merchant clutched his head in despair, cursing the current situation. But at that moment, the sound of flapping wings overhead startled the two cloaked figures, making them look up in astonishment. The entire expedition team huddled together in panic as the sky was suddenly covered by fierce giant birds. The old merchant shrieked in terror, not understanding where these creatures had come from, just before a loud boom signaled the start of the assault. The hooded figure shrieked loudly, desperately swinging his sword to stop the giant birds' approaching talons, but its overwhelming force flung him backward. While the cloaked man struggled, using his bandaged arm to block the wide-eyed creature's maw, in another corner, Master Rodri merely smirked smugly and observed the conflict. The bandit leader furiously ordered to open fire, accusing Master Rodri of stealing something. However, Master Rodri nimbly danced through the gunfire, uttering scornful words that he would never stoop to dealing with thieves. Standing proudly on the giant creature's leg, the cloaked man mocked the small soldiers below as useless fools. Witnessing the scene, the long-haired girl couldn't contain her fury, screaming a vow to eliminate him. A sudden, powerful blow landed directly on the old merchant's face, causing fresh blood to splatter, stunning all witnesses, from the captain to the assistant, into silence. The older man nearby could only cover his mouth, exclaiming in outrage at this audacious act. The attacker relentlessly swung a knife aimed at the bound female captive, making her scream in terror. Standing nearby, Master Rodri witnessed the violent scene with wide eyes filled with horror. Then he immediately rushed forward. The elf girl desperately screamed Master Rodri's name as she saw herself falling freely from a height. The man had slashed fiercely at the air, a strike that should have connected with the elf girl. The merchant and the soldiers gathered together, hoping to defeat the approaching flock of birds. The old merchant coldly crushed the stone beneath his feet into fragments. The sound of shattering stone, like a death knell, made the old professor tremble, his face turning pale from the overwhelming dread approaching. The old merchant could only watch helplessly as Master Rodri soared into the air, carrying their small companion. Behind him, the giant bird's wings spread wide like a dark shadow engulfing any hope of rescue. The old merchant frantically screamed orders to fire, but his scream quickly died out, giving way to astonishment. Right before his eyes, an invisible blade had swept past, making the subordinate soldier frantically realize his arm had been severed from his body. A dry thud echoed as a sharp blade plunged deep into the old merchant's back. The excruciating pain contorted his face, and his body convulsed from the fatal sneak attack. Master Rodri caught the girl, while the knife plunged straight into the old merchant. After being struck, the old merchant then fell down into the chasm below. Faced with Master Rodri's grave assessment of the extremely potent venom, the elf girl bowed her head, accepting full responsibility with a face full of remorse. The elf girl standing beside her couldn't hide her worry either, looking at Master Rodri, awaiting a solution. Master Rodri sharply questioned her reckless jump, as if seeking demise, and the elf girl could only bow her head hesitantly. She avoided his gaze, stammering, unable to provide a convincing reason for her impulsiveness. The elf girl gently stroked her hair, her cheeks flushed and a mischievous smile played on her lips. She expressed her absolute trust in Master Rodri, her eyes shining with undisguised admiration. Master Rodri looked straight ahead, his gaze resolute and his face stern, as if confronting a momentous decision. Silence enveloped him, signaling an impending storm. The freckled man frowned in anger, uttering bitter mockery about the appearance of yet another follower. His sharp gaze seemed to pierce through the person opposite him, showing clear disdain. Master Rodri fell into contemplation, his eyes cast down, full of melancholy. Not a word was uttered, only silence enveloped his refined face, heavy with troubled thoughts. Master Rodri coldly warned the elf girl not to place blind trust in others if she wished to preserve her life, even as he found it ironic to lecture an elf about trust. The calculated advice made the girl turn back in bewilderment. The elf girl blushed with emotion, misunderstanding that Rodri was worried about her safety. She couldn't believe the famously cold master would show such warm concern, while in reality, he was only concerned about losing his guide. Standing before the fallen body of the guide, Master Rodri coldly reiterated the philosophy time is money. Master Rodri crossed his arms in exasperation, finding it only a nuisance that they now had to waste effort finding a new guide. Master Rodri explained in detail the nature of an agreement as an exchange of value for mutual understanding. The elf girl thoughtfully connected that to her role as the orange girl, wondering if that principle could be applied to save this vast forest. Despite Master Rodri's efforts to explain, the horned girl remained completely clueless, her mind reeling with a flurry of question marks. In the end, she could only utter a naive and confused "huh." Master Rodri gazed into the distance, his voice deepening as he revealed the key that could realize the dream of unifying the forest. He believed that what they were searching for was the most crucial piece for that grand endeavor. Master Rodri coldly turned and walked away, leaving a brief remark that it was all just business, disregarding the elf girl's worry. However, a sharp gaze reflecting the cross-shaped image of a mysterious observer indicated that things were not as simple as they seemed. The elf girl smirked mischievously, unexpectedly reminding the other party that they hadn't yet discussed the compensation for her guiding efforts. A cunning demand was evident in her eyes. With an arrogant air, Master Rodri allowed the girl to name her price, considering it a favor because she had earned the right to speak with him. Not to be outdone, the elf girl retorted with a glare that she had also learned enough tricks after observing him for a few days. Master Rodri was about to offer a guiding commitment in exchange for a demand, when the elf girl angrily interrupted. She pointed directly at him, boldly declaring that it was now her turn to set the terms. The young elf's eyes lit up with excitement. She earnestly pleaded to behold the elf forest of the new era. The tall elf girl smiled gently, her eyes filled with tolerance for the younger generation's enthusiasm. Standing before the dark cave entrance, the intruder secretly thought about his ultimate goal, the heart of souls, the source of all magic. He admitted to risking infiltration into the elf forest solely to seize that priceless treasure. The elf girl smirked triumphantly, proudly boasting about her first achievement. She had successfully lured a foolish elf girl to become a sacrificial pawn and a loyal servant for her plan. Master Rodri leaned against the rock wall, panting from exhaustion, while the blonde elf girl was still full of energy. She enthusiastically raised her hand to cheer, encouraging her companion to hold on a little longer. The energetic elf girl enthusiastically led the way through the treacherous cave, excitedly introducing their destination ahead. She affirmed that once they crossed the River of Shadows, they would reach the Village of Elders, where the highest powers converged. The lively elf girl raised her fist high, fervently pledging to lead the way to save the forest. In stark contrast to her bursting enthusiasm, Master Rodri silently observed with a cold expression, secretly evaluating her excessive eagerness. The innocent elf woman turned back to remind her companion not to fall behind, completely unaware of the horrifying truth. The one she trusted to lead was actually a human, and he was secretly guiding her entire forest to the brink of destruction. The elf girl smirked disdainfully, mocking the little girl who was flailing desperately to maintain balance on the slippery rock ledge, looking pathetic and foolish. Master Rodri caught the panicked elf woman in time, calming her with a warm, deep voice. The elf woman regained her composure, mumbling her thanks to the one who had saved her from a dangerous fall. Scene change. In another area, someone suddenly spoke with a delighted voice, unable to help but exclaim in praise upon seeing an incredibly cute appearance before them. Her face flushed with extreme excitement. The elf trio stood in formation in the cave, led by the large young man with a radiant, confident smile. Behind him, the two other men wore stern and worried expressions, creating a stark contrast in the group's atmosphere. The companion girl took a deep breath of relief as she finally escaped the cramped space. She didn't hesitate to complain about the misery of enduring the foul odor of the two men accompanying her throughout the long journey, feeling like she was suffocating. Lisa suddenly embraced the light-haired girl from behind, flashing a bright smile and introducing herself. She playfully called her new friend Sweetie, and curiously asked her name, leaving the other girl flustered. Lisa, with an unsettling expression, leaned close to the elf woman, making a disturbing proposition about having her as his personal companion. He brazenly promised to attend to her every night, leaving the poor elf woman stunned with revulsion and fear. Then he embraced her tightly, causing her to suffocate and be unable to escape. Reprimanded by the bearded man for her hasty attitude, Lisa immediately bristled and retorted. She stubbornly declared this was a private matter for cute girls and told him not to meddle. Mark grumbled, complaining about being forced to befriend an inanimate object. Immediately, his companion retorted with a sharp, sarcastic remark, suggesting he try befriending the looming stalagmite over there instead. The elf girl curiously asked the reason for the group's journey to the River of Shadows, and the bearded warrior launched into a long, empty philosophical discourse on the definition of friendship. Unable to bear it any longer, Lisa shouted at him to shut up, and both sank into an awkward, disappointed silence. The young elf clenched his fists until they trembled, his eyes burning with hatred as he looked ahead. He gritted his teeth and swore he would personally eliminate those at the head of the Council of Elders. Lisa snapped, scolding her companion as an idiot and telling her to stop exaggerating everything. Unjustly scolded, the elf girl merely gaped, bewildered, not understanding what she had done wrong. Lisa painfully recounted the tragedy of his people, that all neighboring villages, including his homeland, had been destroyed by humans. With a bitter voice, he admitted the harsh truth that they had lost their sanctuary. The elf young man couldn't hide his extreme indignation at the Council of Elders' indifference to the catastrophe. He swore he would shatter the corrupt spirit of those in power until they came to their senses and became truly decent leaders. Standing among the survivors, the elf young man boldly declared his own responsibility. He affirmed that as a surviving witness to the catastrophe, he had a duty to act for the future of the entire group. The two young men openly expressed contempt for the heartless leaders and called their own kind hopeless. Those harsh words left the braided-haired girl standing beside them utterly stunned, unable to believe her ears. The elf girl excitedly declared her resolve to save the forest and revealed that her group was also on their way to meet the elders. Hearing this, the elf boy opposite her couldn't hide his emotion, exclaiming that such heroic determination was wonderful and admirable. At the riverbank, the elder elf sternly blocked the expedition group, warning them not to cross the River of Shadows and ordering them to turn back immediately. Despite the group's attempts to explain their situation, he coldly asserted that no one could cross the river without the ferryman's permission. The elder elf, with an angry expression, shouted loudly, declaring that only those holding official invitations from the village elders were authorized to board his boat. Standing before the expedition group in the dark cave, the elder elf firmly declared that if they didn't have an invitation, they should leave immediately. Faced with the challenge, the elf girl confidently smirked, announcing that they did indeed have an invitation right here. While the old man was still taken aback, the elf girl quickly gestured a decisive confirmation. Immediately, the girl with the bun excitedly encouraged Master Rodri to show them that important evidence, trusting in her teacher. However, contrary to expectations, the atmosphere suddenly fell silent as both elves froze. Looking ahead, the elf girl then couldn't contain her extreme dismay, her face breaking out in a cold sweat from the shock of what just happened. It turned out there was no invitation at all, so the elf girl resorted to a pleading tactic, begging the old man to let them pass. Witnessing this pathetic scene, the elf boy hiding nearby could only realize with disappointment that his boasted plan to meet the council was entirely fabricated. The stern elf uncle asked about other paths, and Master Rodri irritably reminded Lisa not to look so distressed. Lisa hesitantly admitted that technically there was another way, but her tone was full of reluctance. To prevent intruders, the village was protected by an intricate system of extremely strict checkpoints on all roads. Attempting to approach in the usual way could take them an entire year to reach their destination. Observing the situation, Master Rodri thoughtfully remarked that the ruling class completely isolating themselves from common folk was no different from a dead-end autocratic monarchy. The elf girl worried that if they couldn't persuade the ferryman, their mission would be a complete failure. Suddenly, a hand tugged sharply at her cloak, making her turn around in alarm. A tragic sight unfolded before their eyes as one of their kin fell, bleeding. The elf boy saw the blood of his people spilled, his face hardening with extreme pain and fury. The old elf, his face contorted in agony, cried out in despair that at this very moment, their people were being ruthlessly eliminated by humans. The old man and the young boy shared a choked anguish, wondering how much more despair they must endure and how much more bloodshed they must witness before it is enough. In that sorrowful memory, the haunting image of desperate children clinging to him, crying and begging to be taken across the river to escape danger, reappeared vividly. The old elf thrashed frantically amidst the besieging crowd, screaming in fear, asking if they wanted to drive the children to their doom and pleading for release. Faced with the situation, the elf girl wondered if such a reaction was too dramatic. However, the old elf coldly warned that the elders would never tolerate it, and violating the rules meant immediate expulsion. The old elf knelt amidst the rubble, sternly declaring that taking away the only home of someone with no other refuge was as cruel as taking their life. The elf boy recounted the tragedy of his friend, who broke the rules to help others cross the river but incurred the elder's wrath. The elf girl continued with a somber expression, confirming that the punishment for that person was permanent expulsion from the cave. Left amidst a sea of dark trees, the old elf could only cling to the faint belief that the elders surely had a plan. Yet overwhelming dread was clearly visible in his desperate eyes. Unable to control her anger, Lisa stormed off, insisting on teaching those lazy individuals a lesson herself and making them bring the boat. The old elf struggled to hold her tightly, trying to dissuade her from this reckless act. Held back, the elf girl cried out indignantly, berating the person opposite as a coward and a scoundrel, asserting through tears that he wasn't the only one who feared death. In a panic, the old elf blurted out the selfish thought that if he perished, the forest's fate would no longer matter. But then he quickly cut himself off, trying to end that negative train of thought. The elf girl slumped down in disappointment, unable to sway the stubborn old man. Meanwhile, the elf girl anxiously turned to ask Master Rodri for his advice on what they should do next. Just as they were at a loss, Master Rodri suddenly announced he had found what they were looking for. The elf girl called out Master Rodri's name in surprise when she saw him standing before a door. With an authoritative demeanor, Master Rodri unexpectedly produced an invitation letter, causing those around him to gape in astonishment and exclaim with doubt. The old elf tremblingly took the document, sweat pouring off him as he couldn't believe his eyes. He stammered, wondering how this could possibly be true, while the guide was no less stunned. It turned out that the so-called invitation letter was merely an old piece of cloth with mysterious writing carved into it, which they had seen before, making everyone realize the truth with a start. With the truth exposed, the long-bearded elf painfully realized it was a forgery, while Master Rodri smirked mockingly at their desperate desire for visitors. The old man could only bow his head, grinding his teeth bitterly as his last hope had vanished. Perceiving the inner turmoil of the suffering boatman, Master Rodri gently asked, holding his staff, if he truly wished to be freed from the burden of constantly turning away those who sought him. The elf girl sharply rejected this, claiming that individual had no conscience whatsoever. However, the old elf calmly retorted, asserting that deep down, he still yearned for legendary heroes to appear and end this chaotic period. That was precisely why, even in this damp, dark cave, he meticulously polished his or every day, as if preserving a fragile, never-fading hope. Although deep down, that solitary person always tormented himself with the bitter thought that no hero would truly come to save them. He was trapped in an earthly hell, torn between the guilt of standing idly by while his people were slaughtered and the extreme fear of a lonely death in exile. Seizing upon that weakness, Master Rodri calculatingly extended his hand, proposing in exchange to take away the fear gnawing at the old man's soul. To the old man's utter astonishment, Master Rodri smiled meaningfully, gently revealing that he happened to possess a spare villa and was ready to offer it as an exchange. It was a newly built, luxurious estate, fully furnished with amenities, located in a prime spot with an unparalleled, breathtaking view of the snow-capped mountains under the moonlight. The old elf admitted it was a precious gift he had received for his service in saving the village, and was ready to hand it over depending on the other's answer. Hearing this, Master Rodri merely flashed a cunning, confident smile. The identity of the hero who would save the forest was revealed to be Rodri. The old man then instructed the young man to use his name to receive a warm welcome from the villagers. Master Rodri considered this a fateful turning point, emphasizing that everything hinged on his decision. Master Rodri couldn't hide his emotion and surprise, tremblingly asking if they truly intended to grant him a place of refuge. In response to that doubt, Master Rodri merely stared straight ahead with a sharp, cold gaze, challenging him to find the answer himself. The atmosphere grew tense as Master Rodri directly questioned the elder, forcing him to confirm whether the invitation letter was a forgery or genuine. Cornered, the old elf could only gulp loudly, sweat pouring down him in extreme fear. Meanwhile, a sinister glimmer of hope flickered in the scheming individual, thinking to himself that if the rumors were true, he could finally escape this torment. Conversely, the old elf fell into a state of extreme confusion, grappling with intense internal conflict at the prospect that it might all be a blatant lie. Unexpectedly, deep within the damp forest, a dry skeleton, covered by tattered cloth, lay isolated at the base of a tree, signaling a shocking discovery. The old elf guardian of the forest stood in contemplation, harboring a faint hope that perhaps tomorrow the forest would return to peace on its own, without her intervention, so she could escape the endless days of suffering. The old elf reassured herself that there was no reason to walk into peril, and in that case, she began to calculate a safer alternative path for herself. Looking down at the blood-stained cloth clutched in her hand, the old elf bitterly told herself that she no longer needed to intervene, and seemed to have resigned herself to the harsh reality. Master Rodri's sharp, menacing gaze sent shivers of fear down the old man's spine. He had a strong premonition that the man accompanying this girl truly possessed the power to completely alter the forest's destiny. At the cave entrance, the old elf stood solemnly before the dark, arch-shaped entrance, his hand gripping his staff tightly, as if preparing himself for a perilous journey ahead. In the dim light, the old elf complained about his poor eyesight, but the long-bearded old man beside him promptly examined the object in his hand and confirmed with certainty that it was genuine. Without hesitation, the elf girl excitedly waved her hand, leading the group, while the burly, bearded man declared he would personally guide them through the next leg of the journey. Sensing the extraordinary aura emanating from the mysterious man, Master Rodri wondered why he wanted to place all his trust in a person with such an intense charisma that it could ignite the hearts of others. The boat drifted into the ink-black darkness, the sound of dripping water echoing in the silent cave, causing fear to begin creeping into the mind of the accompanying elf girl. The journey to meet the leaders began to take on a grim hue as they realized they were adrift on the very river of shadows, fraught with peril and ominous portents. Amidst the mysterious atmosphere, Master Rodri quietly turned his face away, his pensive gaze concealing thoughts no one could decipher. Once settled on the boat, the group finally breathed a sigh of relief. The girls couldn't hide their gratitude, admitting that without timely assistance, they would have almost given up hope midway. The young man named Kaka cheerfully introduced himself, initiating a collaborative relationship with Master Rodri, who had just made a resolute offer to save the forest together. With fervent enthusiasm, Kaka spread his arms wide, eloquently calling for support for those facing hardship, while a mysterious hand was ready to reach out and receive. In contrast to everyone's enthusiasm, Master Rodri coldly declared he only cared about profit and forbade anyone from getting close. The young student quickly offered a forced smile, defending that her master was actually just shy. The group began to reveal their contrasting personalities. Some criticized the child for not being adorable, while others marveled at the beautiful outfits, and Master Rodri brushed away someone else's hand, not wanting to be touched. Standing before the river, the members began to argue. One person felt the water exuded an unusual dread, but another dismissed it, claiming it looked no different from any ordinary river. The older man firmly asserted it was just a simple river, making the young woman realize with surprise that she might have been too suspicious. Though he continuously reassured the girl that there was nothing to fear, the hooded man himself was trembling and sweating profusely. He was unaware of a chilling shadow silently lurking right behind the girl. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the air as a man was covered in a grotesque slime, causing the witnessing girls to recoil in utter terror. It turned out the river was not as ordinary as they had thought. Ghostly river guardians emerged from the water, sending the group into a panic, and the elf girl angrily realized they had been deceived into believing this was a harmless river. The ancient monster was astonished to see its body regenerate after the attack. Without hesitation, Kaka focused intently, delivering a decisive slash to the enemy's leg. In a critical moment, the horned monster tremblingly advised everyone not to be afraid, as fear was the enemy's sustenance, but ironically, he was the most panicked of all, causing his small companion to sigh in exasperation and utter a sarcastic remark. The elf girl boldly declared that if it was to save the forest, this task was too easy. She reassured herself and her teammates that they must show courage if they wanted to cross this river, despite the fear that was present. While Kaka tried to rally everyone's spirits by asserting that the enemy was not frightening as long as they remained calm, the female elf completely broke down. She trembled uncontrollably, screaming in despair that she couldn't bear this pressure. Amidst the troublesome, constantly regenerating enemies, the elf girl fought while venting her frustration on the persistent monsters. Behind him, the white-haired elf cowered, sobbing apologies, believing all this trouble stemmed from herself. Noticing the elf girl's extreme anxiety, the uncle figure pondered for a moment, then turned to reassure her. He gently affirmed that she shouldn't worry too much, as everything would surely be fine. Though Mark was trembling and sweating profusely while trying to reassure everyone, Lisa immediately mocked his large build. She frowned and complained that he was nothing more than a big child who always got into trouble whenever she wasn't around to watch over him. The elf girl gasped in astonishment as she pieced the events together. She couldn't believe her ears when she realized that Lisa and Mark's relationship was, in fact, merely a business partnership. Without hesitation, Kaka lunged forward, plunging his sword into the monster's chest, causing it to shriek in pain. The fatal blow caused the creature's body to begin melting, blending with the desperate wails of its kin all around. With their escape route blocked by the screaming monsters, Kaka frantically urged the cloaked figure to row faster. Meanwhile, the elf girl closed her eyes tightly, telling herself she had to be brave to face this dire situation. The moment danger struck, Master Rodri rushed out to shield the elf girl, swinging his weapon to deflect all debris. The girl could only float in midair, eyes wide with astonishment at her companion's fierce protective power. The atmosphere grew tense as the hunchbacked old man demanded everyone stop joking around. In response, the cloaked man coldly warned that time was money, and he would not forgive anyone who dared to waste his precious time. Master Rodri radiated an overwhelming aura of menace, coldly declaring he would cast them among the fallen if they didn't comply. The threat utterly terrified the blonde girl and the bearded man, who could only weep apologies and admit he was the most formidable individual. The entire group was stunned to realize the monster had stopped its self-regeneration. The elf boy and the cloaked old man couldn't hide their astonishment, wondering if their fear of the demonic had been overshadowed by something far more dreadful. Facing the devastating attack from the bright-haired enigma, Master Rodri screamed in desperate horror. He realized that the individual before him was more terrifying than any specter that had ever haunted this place. Witnessing Master Rodri stand tall, his sword blazing with energy, the old elf and the young man were speechless. They were completely captivated by the immense power and commanding aura emanating from the young warrior. While the young man urged everyone to continue fighting, Mark calmly made a chilling remark. He turned to the girl and said that compared to that other entity, the specters hanging above them looked positively charming. Remembering Rodri's instructions, Kaka gripped his sword tightly, shouting that they had no more time to waste. His determination blazed fiercely while the surrounding common folk screamed in panic. Amidst a storm of energy and flying debris, the warriors charged forward in unison. Kaka roared the slogan, "For the Green Forest," transforming his will to protect his homeland into strength to confront the fierce assault. A silent night enveloped the old boat anchored amidst jagged rocks. Only the flickering light from a lantern and the sighing of the wind broke this gloomy silence. While his teammates were utterly exhausted, unable to move, Rodri remained surprisingly energetic. The tired man could only give a wry smile, admitting that Rodri once again had to carry the entire group on his shoulders. Master Rodri sternly reprimanded his teammate for being overly familiar with an unsuitable individual. Kaka reluctantly nodded in agreement, causing the elder to sigh in exasperation. Without many words, Kaka and Master Rodri exchanged a knowing fist bump. The young man's determined gaze met his comrade's calm demeanor, signaling their unity in the face of the upcoming challenge. The old elf pointed into the pitch-black night ahead, declaring that it was only the entrance to the River of Shadows. This information left the entire expedition group stunned, as they had thought they had already reached the very depths of darkness. As the boat drifted deeper into the cave, the cloaked man issued a grim warning. He revealed that a fearsome gatekeeper with a chilling name, the Devouring Shadow, awaited them ahead. The old elf scoffed and asserted that passing through was impossible, causing the girl to begin to panic. She turned to question them, her voice trembling as she demanded to know what the group had to do to survive in this situation. At their most desperate moment, a mysterious hand suddenly held up a star-shaped item, sparkling brightly. A confident voice rang out, inviting everyone to witness the miracle about to unfold. The old elf proudly introduced a potion made from the soul dust of the light deities, which would protect them from the darkness. The appearance of this treasure made the black-bearded warrior and the bright-haired elf cheer with excitement, shedding a heavy burden from their hearts. Contrary to the man's caution, who thought it was too early to celebrate, the elf girl appeared extremely confident. She smirked slyly, confidently asserting that the old men on the council would never be able to resist her schemes. The man turned to look at Lisa, frankly admitting that he had no idea what she was talking about. This naive statement made the nearby member utter a sound of utter astonishment. The elf girl grimaced and complained about the bitter taste of the potion she had just drunk. Though the old elf calmly explained that he had added all sorts of nourishing herbs to it, the boy next to her still wondered if it was really necessary to torture their taste buds so much. Immediately after using the item, a strange warmth began to spread from deep within their bodies. The elf girl blushed at the unfamiliar sensation, while the water girl also surfaced with extreme astonishment at this sudden change. The old elf carefully instructed everyone not to drop the potion bottle, emphasizing that this was an extremely rare item of which he only had a few bottles left. The two girls listened intently, aware that their lives in this darkness depended entirely on that small bottle. Watching two of their kin devour food crudely, the elf girl couldn't hide her disgust. He stood frozen at the door, his face contorted as if about to vomit at this uncivilized sight. Holding the precious potion bottle, the elf girl secretly scoffed at the Elder Council's lax security for entrusting such an item to a frail old man. However, she also breathed a sigh of relief, as that oversight made crossing the river easier than ever. Holding a game piece, Master Rodri was lost in worried thought. He realized the immeasurable danger if humans were to obtain this potion bottle, as they could use it to infiltrate the heart of the elf territory and launch a devastating attack. As if reading that worry, the old elf smirked mysteriously. He turned to reassure the girl accompanying him that there was no need to worry, because the cunning elders had already meticulously planned for every worst-case scenario. A close-up of a mysterious hand cradling a star-shaped bottle glowing softly. This small item was now not only the key to crossing the river, but also held the fate of both races in the ongoing clandestine war. The old elf held out the potion bottle, his eyes gleaming with cunning. He emphasized that this elixir was a marvelous panacea for the elf race, bringing about unforeseen effects. However, Master Rodri stared at the sparkling object in his hand with a sharp, cold gaze. He coldly revealed the harsh truth. For humans, this panacea was nothing short of a deadly poison. The cloaked figure's declaration struck the group like a bolt of lightning. Any mortal who drank it would perish instantly. Rodri looked up with a stunned expression, realizing the fatal trap the group might have unwittingly stepped into.